Man, I was totally hooked. One day at the local park, I tried pickleball for the first time, and I swear it was like love at first swing. The sound of the paddle hitting the ball, the quick moves, the way it just clicked. Yeah, I was in. So, naturally, I decided right then and there I was gonna build my very own pickleball court in the backyard. Why not, right? I had the space, the passion, and the need to destroy anyone who dared challenge my pickleball prowess. First things first, though, I'm not an idiot. I made sure to double-check every single permit, approval, and neighborhood guideline. You know how it is with HOAs breathing down your neck like rabid hawks. Everything was totally above board, signed, stamped, sealed, and ready to go. There wasn't a single rule I hadn't covered. Finally, construction day rolled around. The contractors pulled up bright and early, hauling in equipment and concrete mixers. I watched them get to work, the sound of machinery and progress humming through the air. Man, it was satisfying. I was already picturing the epic matches I was going to have with friends and family. Hell, I even considered throwing a little tournament once it was done. But of course, there's always one person who has to stick their nose where it doesn't belong. And in my neighborhood, that person was none other than HOA Karen. You know the type. Lives to complain, practically married to her clipboard, and somehow always convinced that her opinion is law. Apparently, she'd been lurking around the perimeter since sunrise, peeking through the gaps in the fence like some kind of nosy raccoon. I caught a glimpse of her every now and then, clutching her phone like she was on some kind of secret stakeout. I ignored it at first, figured maybe she'd just get bored and go knit a sweater out of other people's misery or something. But nah, this was Karen we're talking about. She wasn't going to just sit back and let someone enjoy their own backyard in peace. Little did I know, the pickleball court was about to become ground zero for the latest HOA drama, and Karen was about to make it her personal mission to ruin my day. We were right in the middle of construction when Hurricane Karen made landfall. I was inside grabbing some iced tea when I heard the yelling. Stepping out onto the patio, I saw her, arms crossed so tight it looked like she was trying to crush her own ribs, face scrunched up like she'd just eaten a whole lemon. She was tearing into the workers, practically foaming at the mouth. "Stop this right now," she screeched, pointing her finger like some kind of deranged traffic cop. The poor guys just stood there, totally bewildered, looking from her to me like they'd accidentally wandered onto some weird reality show. I took a deep breath, reminded myself that jail probably wasn't worth it, and walked over as calmly as I could. "Karen," I started, trying to sound as unbothered as possible. "What's the issue here?" She spun around to face me, eyes blazing with righteous fury. "You can't just build whatever you feel like in this neighborhood," she spat, like I was setting up a nuclear power plant instead of a pickleball court. "This is a violation of HOA rules." Now, I knew damn well I wasn't breaking any rules. I had every permit, every form signed, every piece of paper proving that I was 100% in the clear. But you know Karen. Facts don't mean squat when she's on one of her power trips. Keeping my cool, I said, "Actually, Karen, I've got all the permits and approvals right here." I gestured toward the folder sitting on the patio table. "Everything's been cleared. I'm not breaking any rules." She didn't even look at it. Just scoffed, like I'd shown her a coloring book instead of legal documents. "I don't care what papers you have," she snapped. "I'm the HOA president, and I'm telling you that this monstrosity is not allowed." I could feel my patience wearing thinner than a dollar store napkin. "It's just a pickleball court," I said, forcing a smile. Karen's eyes narrowed, and she gave me this look like I'd just insulted her entire family lineage. "I'll call the police," she shrieked, whipping out her phone like it was some magic wand that could make my court disappear. I almost laughed, almost. But instead I just leaned back against the fence and shrugged. "Go ahead, be my guest." She hesitated, clearly not expecting me to call her bluff. For a second, I thought maybe she'd just stomp off and complain to her little HOA minions, but no, she actually dialed. Watching her huff and puff into the phone like a furious little dragon, I couldn't help but smirk. Lady had no idea she was about to call the cops on the very guy who ran the damn station. The second Karen hung up, she gave me this triumphant smirk like she'd just won the neighborhood Hunger Games. I had to bite back a laugh. This woman really thought she was about to call in the cavalry to shut down my backyard project. Joke's on her. While we waited, I decided to try one more time to talk some sense into her. Karen, listen, I said, doing my best to sound reasonable. I've got every permit approved by the city and the county. Your HOA doesn't override that. Plus, there's literally no rule against building a pickleball court on private property. She rolled her eyes so hard I thought she'd sprained something. You think you're so smart, she sneered. The HOA has the final say on any construction in this neighborhood, and I say no. I raised an eyebrow. Okay, show me the rule. I'll wait. Karen puffed up like an angry pigeon. I don't need to show you anything, she snapped. Everyone knows the HOA controls property aesthetics. Your, whatever that is, ruins the look of the neighborhood. Now, I was the one rolling my eyes. It's a pickleball court, not a garbage dump. And it's in my backyard. You can't even see it from the street. That doesn't matter, she barked, waving her hands like she was conducting a chaotic orchestra. Your backyard is still part of the community's image, and I won't have it looking like some public park. I couldn't help but snort. You know a lot of folks actually like parks, right? Fresh air, places to be active, all that good stuff? She looked at me like I had just suggested replacing her prized rose bushes with plastic flamingos. This is a classy neighborhood, she huffed. And I will not let you turn it into some recreational slum. I almost clapped for that one. Recreational slum. Seriously? You're reaching, Karen. Before she could whip out another insult, I heard the sound of a patrol car rolling up. Karen straightened up like she was about to receive a Medal of Honor. The officer stepped out, and I immediately recognized him. Officer Ryan. Good guy, fair, not a fan of HOA nonsense. Karen practically sprinted to him, fake tears already streaming down her face. Officer, thank goodness you're here. This man is destroying the neighborhood with his illegal construction. You have to stop him. Ryan gave her a blank look, then glanced at me. Chief? What's going on here? I barely held back my grin. Karen's face went from smug to pure confusion in half a second. Chief? She echoed, looking between us like she'd just seen a ghost. I just gave her a little shrug. Yeah, funny story. Turns out I'm the police chief. You just called the cops on me. Karen's mouth dropped open, and I swear I saw her soul leave her body for a second. She opened and closed her mouth like a fish out of water, trying to piece together what just happened. Ryan cleared his throat, clearly trying not to laugh. Ma'am, do you have any actual evidence of illegal activity? Karen spluttered. But he's building something. That's illegal. Ryan glanced over at the court in progress, then at me. Chief, everything in order here? I nodded. Yep, permits, approvals, the whole 9 yards. Ryan just gave me a nod, then turned back to Karen. Looks like everything's legal. You might want to check the HOA guidelines before calling 911 next time. Karen just stood there, face pale, trying to process how badly this had just blown up in her face. Meanwhile, I just smiled and gave her a little wave. You good, Karen? Need anything else? She didn't answer, just turned and stomped off, muttering something about talking to the mayor. Yeah, good luck with that. One of the officers, Jackson, raised an eyebrow when he saw me. Chief, what's going on here? Karen spun around so fast I thought she might give herself whiplash. Chief? She shrieked, like the word physically hurt her. I just gave her a casual shrug and turned to Jackson. Hey, officer. Just trying to build a pickleball court in my own backyard. Apparently, that's a crime now. Jackson shot me a knowing look, clearly trying to keep his composure. We got a call about illegal construction, he said, glancing over at the half-finished court, and the workers who were just kind of standing around awkwardly. Karen jumped in, waving her arms like a possessed traffic cop. It's against the HOA rules. He's ruining the entire aesthetic of the neighborhood. You have to arrest him. The other officer, Martinez, gave me a quick nod before turning to Karen. Ma'am, could you explain what specific laws or ordinances are being violated here? Karen hesitated, clearly thrown off by the question. It's a violation of HOA standards. I'm the president and I make the rules. Martinez nodded, looking like he was trying very hard not to laugh. Okay, but HOA rules aren't criminal laws, ma'am. We're here for any violations of the law, not HOA policies. Karen's face turned beet red, but she wasn't giving up yet. But he's disturbing the peace. All that noise and construction equipment, it's unacceptable. I decided to chime in, keeping my tone deliberately calm and casual. Actually, I made sure the contractors followed noise ordinances to the letter. Constructions only during approved hours. And as for permits, I pulled out a neatly organized folder. Everything signed off by the city. You're welcome to double-check. Jackson took the folder and skimmed through it, nodding. Looks good to me, he said, handing it back. Everything's in order. Karen looked like she was about to explode. You're just going to let him get away with this? This is a neighborhood, not some public sports complex. Martinez glanced at Jackson, clearly done with Karen's nonsense. Ma'am, just because you don't like something doesn't make it illegal. If you have an issue with HOA policies, you'll need to address it through your association's formal process. Karen stomped her foot like an angry toddler. He's manipulating you. Just because he's whoever he is. This is favoritism. Jackson crossed his arms, his tone dead serious. Ma'am, you called the police for a non-emergency and you're causing a public disturbance. If you continue, we may have to cite you for misuse of emergency services. The look on her face was priceless, complete disbelief mixed with sheer panic. You can't do that! I'm the HOA president! Martinez just shook his head. That doesn't put you above the law. Is there anything else you need from us today? Karen sputtered, looking for some kind of lifeline, but nobody was biting. Realizing she was thoroughly outmatched, she just let out an angry huff and stormed off, muttering something about contacting the mayor. Once she was out of earshot, Jackson just looked at me and raised an eyebrow. Pickleball, huh? I chuckled. Yeah. Figured it'd be a nice way to stay active. Didn't think it'd turn into a federal case. He grinned. Good luck with that. Let us know if she tries to pull anything else. Will do, I said, giving him a nod before they both headed back to their cars. The contractors, who had been trying not to look too interested in the chaos, finally relaxed and got back to work. I just shook my head, wondering how Karen was going to try and spin this one at the next HOA meeting. Jackson couldn't hold back his smirk any longer. Ma'am, do you even know who you're talking to? He asked, gesturing toward me. Karen shot him an indignant glare, like he'd just asked the dumbest question on earth. I don't care who he is. He's violating HOA standards, and I demand you arrest him. Martinez gave me a quick glance, clearly enjoying this way too much. Ma'am, that's Chief Davis, our boss, the chief of police. Karen's face went from tomato red to paper white in about half a second. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, and for once in her life she was totally speechless. You're the chief? She finally croaked out, her voice a weird mix of disbelief and terror. I gave her a calm, polite smile, the kind you'd give to a toddler throwing a tantrum in the cereal aisle. Yes, ma'am, Chief Davis. I tried to tell you before, but you were too busy threatening to have me arrested. Her eyes darted between me and the officers, desperately looking for some kind of lifeline. I didn't know. You can't just build whatever you want, even if you're whoever you are. Martinez gave her a look that was almost pitying. Ma'am, like we said, the chief followed all the proper procedures. Everything's by the book. There's nothing illegal going on here. Karen's jaw clenched, and I could practically see the gears in her head spinning, trying to figure out how to dig herself out of this hole. But the HOA, the rules! Jackson gave her a shrug. The HOA doesn't override city ordinances or state laws. If the chief has the permits and approvals, there's nothing we can do, or that you can do about it. She just stood there, looking like she'd been slapped in the face with a cold, wet towel. I didn't know he was... I didn't mean to... I raised an eyebrow. You didn't mean to what? Call the cops on a completely legal project because you don't like it? Or waste police resources because you're on some power trip? Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely terrified. She was clearly realizing that she'd just royally screwed up. Jackson, sensing that the drama was pretty much over, gave her a polite but firm nod. "Ma'am, I suggest you head home and maybe take some time to calm down. Misusing emergency services is a serious offense, and we'd hate to see this escalate any further." Karen just gave a weak nod, still looking like her entire world had just collapsed. Without another word, she spun around and practically sprinted back to her house, probably plotting how to spin this disaster to the rest of the HOA. Martinez gave me a nod, clearly still amused. "You want us to stick around, Chief?" "Nah," I replied, waving him off. "I think the storm's passed, for now at least." They both gave me quick salutes before heading back to their patrol cars, and I just stood there, taking in the silence that followed Karen's dramatic exit. The contractors, still clearly entertained, got back to work with a few stifled chuckles. I couldn't help but shake my head, wondering how long it'd take for Karen to come up with some new scheme to make my life miserable. But for now, at least, the coast was clear, and my pickleball court was finally on its way to becoming a reality. I took a deep breath and pulled out the folder I'd prepared weeks ago, just in case Karen pulled something like this. Handing it over to Jackson, I said, "Here's everything: permits, approvals, HOA guidelines, and the official city sign-off. You'll find it's all in order." Jackson flipped through the papers, nodding as he scanned each one. Martinez glanced over his shoulder, giving a low whistle. "Man, you really did cover all your bases, Chief." I shot him a wry grin. I knew Karen would throw a fit the second she saw construction equipment. Figured it was better to be over-prepared. Karen, still fuming, but looking more and more desperate by the second, crossed her arms. "That doesn't matter. The HOA has final say over property aesthetics. This is an eyesore. I have the right to—" Martinez cut her off with a raised hand. "Ma'am, the HOA doesn't supersede city ordinances or private property rights. If Chief Davis has the legal paperwork, and it's all right here, there's nothing that overrides that. You can't just shut down a project because you personally don't like it." She sputtered, her eyes darting between the officers and me like she was trying to find some loophole in reality. "But the neighborhood's image, I'm just trying to maintain the community standards." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "With a pickleball court, that's not exactly a major disruption. Besides, it's in his backyard, barely visible from the road, and the chief's following all noise ordinances and construction guidelines." Karen's face flushed again, but this time with a weird combination of anger and humiliation. But it's not fair. He's just using his position to bully me." I couldn't help but chuckle at that. "Karen, if I wanted to use my position to make your life miserable, I'd do a way better job than just building a pickleball court. Trust me on that." Martinez bit back a laugh while Jackson snapped the folder shut and handed it back to me. "Everything checks out, Chief. No issues here." I gave a nod of thanks. "Appreciate it. Sorry you guys had to waste your time on this." Karen let out an indignant huff, clearly not ready to accept defeat. "You're all just protecting each other. This isn't over. I'll take this to the HOA board." Martinez gave her a flat look. "Ma'am, like I said before, the HOA doesn't override city law. Unless you've got some actual ordinance violations or evidence of wrongdoing, there's nothing else to discuss here." Karen's shoulders sagged as it finally sank in that she wasn't going to win this one. She gave me one last hateful glare before storming back to her house, probably already drafting some whiny complaint to the HOA board. As the officers got back into their cars, Jackson leaned out the window and smirked. "If she tries anything else, Chief, just give us a call. I've got a feeling this won't be the last we hear from her." I shook my head, laughing. "Wouldn't be surprised. Thanks again, guys." They drove off, and I glanced at the contractors who were still standing there, a little bewildered by the whole spectacle. I gave them a thumbs up, and they got back to work with some murmured jokes about HOA nightmares. I walked back to my porch feeling a mix of frustration and relief. Karen's ego had taken a major hit, but knowing her, she'd find some way to spin this into her favor. At least the pickleball court was still on track. I just hoped she'd give it a rest for a while. Though knowing Karen, that was probably wishful thinking. Jackson cleared his throat and looked Karen dead in the eyes. "Ma'am, I'm going to give you some friendly advice. You need to stop harassing residents over false claims. Calling the police for personal vendettas isn't just a waste of resources. It's borderline illegal. Karen's mouth dropped open like a fish, gasping for air. Harassing? I'm the HOA president. It's my duty to maintain order and uphold community standards. Martinez stepped up, clearly done with her nonsense. Ma'am, HOA president or not, that doesn't give you the right to break the law or make false police reports. You do realize that's a criminal offense, right? For the first time, Karen looked genuinely rattled. False report? Are you kidding me? I called because he's breaking the rules. Jackson raised an eyebrow. The only thing broken here is your understanding of the law. The chief followed all legal procedures and has all the necessary permits. You calling the police to try and shut down a perfectly legal project is not just petty. It's straight-up abuse of the emergency system. Karen's face turned crimson, and she looked around like she expected a rescue team to swoop in and back her up. This is ridiculous. I was just trying to do my job as president. The neighborhood deserves better than this monstrosity. She waved a dramatic hand toward the partially built court, like it was some kind of toxic waste dump. Martinez exchanged a glance with Jackson, both clearly holding back laughter. Ma'am, we're done here. Stop causing trouble where there isn't any. Or next time, we might have to consider charging you for filing a false report, you understand? Karen's bravado crumbled like a sandcastle hit by a wave. She muttered something under her breath that sounded suspiciously like, I'll appeal to the board. But none of us paid her any mind. She stomped off toward her house, still huffing and puffing like a toddler who didn't get their way. As she disappeared inside, Jackson turned to me and smirked. Think she'll actually take it to the HOA board? I snorted. Oh, definitely. Karen never quits, but at this point she's just embarrassing herself. Martinez cracked a grin. Good luck with that. Let us know if she pulls another stunt. We'll be happy to remind her that the law isn't her personal tool for being a pain in the ass. I chuckled and gave them both a wave as they drove off. The contractors looked at me, half amused and half concerned. One of them, a big guy named Tony, scratched his head. Man, she's got a real stick up her ass, huh? You have no idea, I replied, shaking my head. Just keep doing your thing. If she comes back and starts trouble, let me handle it. Tony nodded and got back to work, while I finally allowed myself to relax a bit. It wasn't over. Not with Karen's obsessive need to control everything. But at least the police had put her in her place for now. I just hoped she'd finally get it through her head that being HOA president didn't make her queen of the world. Though, knowing Karen, that might be asking for a miracle. The next morning, I was out back, checking on the progress, when I noticed a couple of neighbors strolling over, coffee mugs in hand and smirks on their faces. One of them, Mike from 2 doors down, gave me a nod. Man, I heard Karen tried to call the cops on you yesterday, he said, barely containing his laughter. I rolled my eyes. Yeah, she did. Thought she could flex her HOA muscle and shut down the whole project. His wife, Carol, snorted. She really thought she could push you around? Guess she forgot who she was messing with. Before I could respond, more neighbors started showing up, some bringing donuts, others just curious about the aftermath. It was like an impromptu block party, and everyone seemed to be in surprisingly good spirits given the situation. An older woman named Patty, who'd lived here for decades, shook her head. About time someone put that woman in her place. She's been on a power trip ever since she got voted in. I raised an eyebrow. She's been causing trouble for that long? Patty gave a tired sigh. Oh, honey, you have no idea. Last year, she tried to fine me for having excessive garden decorations. I had 3 gnomes. 3. Apparently it was cluttering the landscape. Mike laughed. She gave me hell for parking my old truck in the driveway instead of the garage. Claimed it was an eyesore. It's a classic Ford, for crying out loud. Another neighbor chimed in. She made me repaint my mailbox because she didn't like the shade of green. Said it didn't fit the neighborhood's visual identity. The more stories they shared, the more I realized Karen had been harassing people for years over the most ridiculous stuff. I knew she was a pain, but I had no idea the whole neighborhood was dealing with it. Carol leaned in conspiratorially. You know, We've been talking, and we think it's time to put an end to her little dictatorship. You gave us all a wake-up call when you stood up to her. We're planning to challenge her at the next HOA meeting. Maybe even vote her out." I couldn't help but smile. "That sounds like a plan. I'll back you guys up, whatever you need." Patty grinned. "You just keep building that pickleball court. We've got this." We spent the next hour swapping stories and eating donuts while the contractors kept working, clearly entertained by the whole scene. It felt good to know I wasn't alone in dealing with Karen's nonsense. And even better to know the community was ready to push back. Later that afternoon, I caught Karen peeking out her window, glaring at the gathering like we were plotting some kind of coup. I gave her a little wave and watched her yank the curtains shut. The neighborhood had finally had enough of her power-hungry antics. Whether she liked it or not, her reign as the self-appointed dictator was about to come crashing down. And I couldn't wait to see it. The big day finally arrived. HOA meeting night. I wasn't planning to speak, just wanted to see how things played out. But judging by the buzzing energy outside the community center, it was clear folks had come prepared. As I walked in, I spotted Mike waving me over to a group of neighbors huddled together like they were plotting some kind of revolution. He handed me a printout of the meeting agenda, but it was obvious that the main event wasn't on paper. It was Karen. When Karen strutted up to the front, clipboard in hand, and her signature scowl firmly in place, the room fell quiet. She didn't waste any time launching into some speech about preserving neighborhood standards and ensuring aesthetic integrity. It was all typical Karen nonsense. But as soon as she opened the floor for community concerns, Patty shot up from her seat like she'd been launched from a catapult. "Karen," Patty started, voice steady but sharp. "Why did you think it was okay to try and destroy someone's private property without even consulting the community or the homeowner? You've been on a power trip for too long, and we're done with it." The room broke into scattered applause and a few shouts of agreement. Karen tried to keep her composure, but I could see her grip tighten on that clipboard. Mike chimed in next. "You can't just unilaterally decide what's good for the neighborhood. This is a community, not your personal kingdom." A few more neighbors started speaking up, sharing stories about Karen's ridiculous demands and harassment over the years, everything from mailbox colors to garden gnomes to parking violations. Karen had found a way to make everyone's lives a little more miserable. She tried to regain control, tapping her clipboard against the podium like a judge with a gavel. "Now, wait just a minute," she snapped. "Everything I've done has been in the community's best interest. If you all followed the rules, we wouldn't have these problems." Patty wasn't having it. "What rules? Your rules? You can't just make things up as you go. We're tired of being bullied." At that point, the HOA board members, who had been sitting awkwardly off to the side, finally decided to get involved. One of them, a guy named Tim, cleared his throat and addressed the crowd. "Folks, it's clear that a lot of you have valid concerns about how the HOA has been run. We're here to represent you, not dictate your lives. Maybe it's time we reconsider who's leading this association." Patty wasted no time jumping on that. "I make a motion to remove Karen as HOA president effective immediately." The room erupted in agreement. Karen looked around, clearly panicked, trying to muster any support. But no one was on her side. Even the board members looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Tim nodded and called for a vote. Hands shot up all over the room, practically unanimous. Karen tried to protest, mumbling something about maintaining standards. But her words fell on deaf ears. When it was officially announced that she was being removed, Karen stormed out, red-faced and sputtering about how ungrateful everyone was. I swear I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Tim spoke up again, this time a bit more relaxed. "We'll be implementing stricter guidelines to make sure no one person has that much control again. From now on, decisions will be made as a community." People started chatting excitedly, already talking about hosting a neighborhood BBQ to celebrate the end of Karen's reign. Mike clapped me on the shoulder with a grin. "Looks like your pickleball court did more than just give you a new hobby. It saved the whole neighborhood." I just smiled, relieved that the nightmare was finally over, and knowing the whole community had come together to make it happen. With Karen officially dethroned and out of the picture, construction on the pickleball court wrapped up without a hitch. The contractors put on the final touches, and man, it looked fantastic. Smooth, bright, and ready for action. I couldn't help but feel a little proud, especially knowing it had become a bit of a neighborhood victory symbol. Once the paint dried and the net was set up, I knew what had to be done. Throw the biggest, most epic grand opening party this neighborhood had ever seen. Flyers went out and word spread faster than wildfire. People offered to bring snacks, drinks, and even a portable speaker for some music. It wasn't just about the court anymore. It was about celebrating the end of Karen's reign of terror. On the big day, the place was buzzing. Folks showed up with lawn chairs, coolers, and even a fold-out tent for shade. Someone brought a grill, and soon the smell of burgers and hot dogs filled the air. Kids ran around playing tag while the adults gathered around the new court, chatting and catching up like they hadn't done in years. Mike showed up fashionably late, carrying a massive bowl of homemade guac and chips. "Couldn't let you throw a party without my famous dip," he joked. I just laughed and gave him a pat on the back, glad to see everyone in such good spirits. As people gathered around, I stepped onto the court to give a quick speech. I wasn't much of a public speaker, but after everything that had gone down, I figured it was worth saying a few words. I cleared my throat and raised my voice just enough to get folks' attention. "Hey, everyone! First off, I just want to say thank you to every single one of you for coming out today. This court isn't just mine, it's ours. It's a place where we can come together, have some fun, and forget about all the drama that's been hanging over us lately. So let's break it in right. Who's up for the first game?" The cheer that followed could have raised the roof if we'd had one. Mike and I teamed up for the inaugural match against Patty and her husband, Rick. Turned out Patty had a wicked serve, but we held our own. People clapped and laughed as the game got heated. But in the end, it didn't even matter who won. The important thing was seeing everyone having a blast. No tension, no arguments, just pure good old-fashioned fun. As the sun started setting, someone pulled out a few strings of fairy lights and wrapped them around the fence, giving the whole place a cozy, festive glow. The music got turned up, and the burgers kept grilling. It felt like the neighborhood had come alive again. Later on, as I sat on one of the benches, catching my breath after another intense match, Patty plopped down beside me, wiping sweat from her forehead. "You know," she said, grinning, "it's been a while since the neighborhood felt this normal. Feels good." I nodded, looking around at the smiling faces and hearing the shouts of encouragement from the court. "Yeah," I agreed. "It's amazing what happens when people stop fighting and just enjoy life." By the end of the night, I was exhausted, but happy. People lingered, even after the games were over, chatting and sharing stories. I knew the court would be more than just a place to play. It had become a place where the neighborhood could reconnect and rebuild. As I packed up leftover snacks and folded a few chairs, Mike caught my eye and gave me a thumbs up. "You did good, Chief," he said, and I just smiled back, knowing that sometimes the best way to win is to just stand your ground and let the truth do the talking. And with that, the court became more than just concrete and paint. It became a fresh start for all of us. As I step onto the court and serve the first ball, I can't help but reflect on how wild the past few weeks have been. Who knew building a pickleball court would end up being the spark that lit a fire under the whole neighborhood? But honestly, it wasn't just about the court. It was about standing up to someone who'd been abusing their power for way too long. Watching the ball bounce across the court, I realized something important. Power doesn't give anyone the right to bully or intimidate. Karen thought her HOA title made her untouchable, like she was some kind of queen ruling over us peasants. But authority doesn't mean throwing your weight around or making everyone's life miserable just because you can. Real leadership is about doing what's best for the community, not just for your own ego. I guess the whole mess taught me that sometimes you just gotta take a stand, even when it's uncomfortable or downright infuriating. And the crazy thing is, once one person steps up, it gives others the courage to do the same. Turns out, most of the neighbors had been dealing with Karen's nonsense for years, but never thought they could push back. They just needed someone to show them it was possible. A loud cheer from the other side of the court snaps me out of my thoughts. Rick just scored a point on Mike, and they're both giving each other a hard time about it. I can't help but laugh. It feels good to see everyone so relaxed, just enjoying themselves without looking over their shoulders. No more Karen lurking around. No more pointless rules, no more drama. Just friends and neighbors coming together to actually enjoy the space we share. I glance around at the court, the bright lights, the people laughing and cheering, and I can't help but smile. This court isn't just a place to play. It's a reminder that our community's stronger than one person's ego. We stood up, fought back, and took our neighborhood back from the grip of Karen's petty tyranny. Mike jogs over, wiping sweat from his forehead, and nudges me with his elbow. "Man, you look way too deep in thought for a pickleball game," he jokes. I chuckle and shake my head, just thinking how it's nice to actually enjoy our own space without someone breathing down our necks. He grins. "Yeah, I guess the neighborhood needed a wake-up call. Thanks for being the one to set it straight, Chief." I shrug, but I know he's right. Sometimes it takes more than just paperwork and rules to fix things. It takes standing your ground and not backing down when someone crosses the line. As I pick up the ball to serve again, I take one last look at the court full of friends, and I know we did something good here. No more power trips, no more intimidation, just good vibes and good company. I bounce the ball a couple of times, give Mike a quick nod, and serve it with a little extra spin because, hey, life's too short not to have a little fun.